Lesson 3, orchestrators connect the dots. Have you ever wondered what that means? What does it mean to connect the dots? I hear that a lot in business. Oh, let's connect the dots. But what does it mean? Well, let's frame this out a bit. As orchestrators, we're mission and goal focused. So what does it mean to be results focused versus mission focused? If we're focused on goals driving results and we're trying to achieve success, how do we know we're making any progress? What does it look like? How would you answer that? Why am I using the word mission in the first place? Well, if you think about it, it's what we're supposed to be achieving. We have a vision. The mission is how we get it done. So are we focused on the mission, or are we just here to get results? How does that work? Let's frame this out a little bit. On the left side, it's very easy to fall into what I call the activity trap. Because results and sales are oftentimes a numbers game, we can fall into the trap of let's get things done. Let's get our checklist done. Let's drive the project plan. We have dates to hit. We have to go. Go, 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 go. On the right, the mission, for example, how do we increase pipeline, or how do we increase average deal size, or setting goals around what it means to be successful, or perhaps it's even something bigger like achieving market share. There's a lot to figure out. And when you look at that, it's a journey. So how do you know you're making any progress? And how do you know you're aligning to execute the strategy? This is easier said than done. So from the CEO's lens, what does enablement provide? In the last module, we talked about what that means. The CEO has expectations of every function in the organization. Let me tell you a story about an enablement team launching a platform. They picked the vendor, they picked the launch date, and they hit it. They turned it on, but nobody used it. It's very easy to point fingers and say, well, they didn't do this, they didn't do that. They didn't put together communication. They didn't enroll managers. They didn't talk about it long enough. There's a bunch of things that they didn't do. It's very easy to roll through that. But let's flip it around and ask, how would they be successful and ensure that they're successful in rolling out a platform? Do people involved know why they're rolling out a platform in the first place? What business problem does it solve? When you think about it that way, there are a lot of moving parts. People, processes, information, all have to come together in order to figure out how we're going to get there, how we're going to achieve success. Why are we launching this platform? So many inputs, so many perspectives, so many ways, so many best practices. What is the value of enablement in that? Why does enablement exist? How would you answer that? And then what are you producing? What are you producing because you're involved? Well, you know, we're an enablement. We have a leadership role. What if you didn't lead it? What would happen? What is different because you're there? This is an interesting discussion, and I'm not trying to make you defensive, but these are the questions that executives ask about enablement. What is different because we're involved? Take a moment, pause the video. If you were rolling out a platform, how would you answer that question? What is different because you're involved? Pause the video and write it down. All right, did you do it? I hope you did it. It's really important to engage with these questions. I know I ask a lot of questions, but it's really for a purpose. I'm really encouraging you to do that. I know, and a lot of times in learning, like for example, on LinkedIn Learning, it's just listen, call it done. This is not that type of program. You're on a quest, right? So take the time and answer these things. Well, when it comes to mission and goal focus, it's hard because everybody sees things differently. For example, if I put you in a room with an elephant and turn the lights off, and I put you in there with a bunch of other people, everybody would fumble around. And maybe you even heard this story before. Everybody fumbles around. They all touch a part of the elephant. I've got the snake. I've got a snake. It's the trunk. I have a tree. It's the leg. I have a plant, piece of grass. It's the tail. It's really hard to put together the overall picture of the elephant. That's because everybody has their own perspective based on what they see. And we're wired to see things in sales. We're wired to see things in marketing. We're wired to see things in product. We're wired to see things in finance. The challenge with driving outcomes with sales today is the integrated view. If everybody's doing their own thing, there is no unified view. It's really hard to simplify because everybody's doing their own thing. So how do we create a shared understanding in this environment? Well, orchestration. Orchestration enables a cohesive commercial experience for customers. Scott talked about the idea of what he calls productitis. When he was talking about it in one of his webinars, he talked about it as the hidden force within companies. He called it the hidden disease that strikes companies. They're too focused on the product, not what the product does. There's so many companies that say, oh, we're customer centric, but they can't put the meat behind it. They don't know how to actually translate it into action because they can only organize themselves based on their product. Productitis is a hidden disease. It's something that has to be diagnosed. It creates friction. It fills the customer experience with noise. It's a black blob. Orchestration is the antidote. Connecting the dots literally. Cohesive, frictionless, customer experience. Bringing together people, process, information, and technology. How would you bring together those components to fight productitis? How would you surround the customer with these things? Well, there's a way to do it, and we'll talk about that throughout this course. So orchestration can actually help us connect the dots, but what are those dots? What happens when you connect the dots, depending on the outcomes you're trying to drive? When you think about people and process and information and technology, the connections among and between these elements is what this could look like. There's a lot of dots to connect. And as an orchestrator, it's helpful to think about these connections between everybody and everything, between information and technology and process, because this is where your value is. And there are a lot of gaps. For example, just the gap between people and process. Just the gap between people and process. What would you label that? How would you label that? What about between technology and process? What happens there? What about information? Who needs what information? What information is required to drive the process? And then what information is the process providing back to who? So this capability that we talked about in lesson 1 is critical to the success of the company, but it's hidden because no one person is responsible for this integrated view. That's why orchestration is valuable. For example, let's look at rolling out a CRM tool in support of the go-to-market. If we put go-to-market here and we say, look, we're going to roll out a technology, how are we going to make sure that the CRM is a system of record? How are we going to simplify the process? How are we going to make sure that people are effective and efficient in what they're doing? What insights are we going to gain to give to people? What workflow do people need to follow in order to get the value out of the CRM? How would we think this through and make decisions and drive the process forward with governance? Let's take a look at what this might look like. Let's say you're going to help roll out messaging, and there's a new way to message your company, your platform, solution, etc. And what you want to do is think about, look, we've got to be able to communicate and help sellers communicate. We can't just wave our magic wand and make them communicate a certain way. So what we're going to do is there's a new message, and maybe enablement helped build it. So thinking about that, how would we use this orb? How would we use the orb, the orchestration orb, to help plan that out? How would we use that? And let's say work on message enablement and work out a messaging program to market a product and a service, especially with the goal is to drive cohesion and clarity. Well, we could drive clarity across teams. How would we do that? Well, make sure that people are on the right path. Make sure they have the right information. Make sure there's a process that we're following to bring people along. Make sure that there's business impact and business rules defined as we're thinking it through. What about codifying a map or visualizing the economic value for salespeople? What is the economic value of what your company is selling? How might that be codified into information that salespeople can use in the sales process? How does that work? Where does the information about the product and the solution and the message actually end up in the sales process? How is it parsed out or organized across the sales process? These are interesting questions to figure out. Somebody has to figure that out if we're going to simplify. What about helping customers and helping clients drive change in their organization? What type of information do those people need to drive change inside their own company? If the buyer's world is going to change, what processes are going to change? What type of impact to technology? How do you bring people along? What about targeting, adopting solutions and services and all the change management? What type of adoption can salespeople drive? And what's the role of process and information and people? Who's going to help ensure that adoption, ensure that the solution sticks? And then on the customer side, when it comes to time to ensuring that this works over the long term, how does it get woven into the company for the long term? How does it get woven into the operating model? What type of technology changes and evolution and phases and releases need to happen? What's the process for continuous improvement? Who's actually using it, and what type of feedback do they provide? What type of information do they provide and feedback do they provide? It's a lot to think about. This is the value of orchestration, is figuring that out, because nobody else will. We'll talk more in detail about why that is and what you can do about it as you continue in this course. All I wanted to do in this lesson is talk about orchestration and frame out this concept of connecting the dots and get you to think about the value of connecting the dots in your company. If you can do this, what's the impact? If you can develop an approach and a vision for bringing this together, what's the impact? What do you need in order to do that? How would that work? We're going to talk about that as you continue this quest. Module 3 was all about bringing it together into a picture, a unified view of way to connect the dots. In modules 1 and 2, we talked about what does it mean to orchestrate or be an orchestrator. In this module, we talked about the concept of orchestration. So if orchestrators are orchestrating, what does that actually mean? We talked about the attributes of being an orchestrator. Here we're talking about what are you orchestrating? It's the orb, this orchestration orbs. And it's about synthesis, not breaking things apart. It's about bringing things together. Progress is found as you engage, as you figure things out. It's not about an arbitrary deadline, because the outcome of improving sales or driving growth is really never fully achieved. You're going to have to learn how to bring these things together and connect the dots in a way that allows you some room to learn as you go and do what you can. And the key here is to frame out the challenge so that you can pursue it. There will be a lot of people telling you to do a point solution and to go after a specific piece. Not a lot of people will be thinking about how to connect the dots across the organization. But if you can do that, and if you can bring people together to help them see, you'll be able to increase your impact and really remove the burden from salespeople. Remember, it's a process. It's a process. It's a journey where you're on a quest. You might have more questions than answers here in module 1, and that's okay. Be uncomfortable with that. It's totally okay, because you're going to have to learn as you go and make iterations over time to get things done. So what I want you to do is I want you to take your participant guide, open up your participant guide and go to module 1. And when you look in module 1, take a look back at what it means to be an orchestrator. What did you write down? And now update that. Update your comments for are you an orchestrator? Also make some notes on any big takeaways. What questions do you have? Write them down. I want to make sure we answer those. And remember, be comfortable being uncomfortable. Have some patience in understanding what's going on. This is a complex challenge. It requires some patience. This was just module 1. Don't worry, you'll get there. Please take the quiz to help anchor some of these concepts and continue on to lesson 2 and module 2.